Good morning. It's Monday, July 22nd, 2024. This is Muscatine County Board of Supervisors. I'd like to call the meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is to review the agenda. Sorry.
So moved.
Second. Motion by Scott, second by Nathan. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Item 3 is discussion of possible action approved claims dated July 22nd, 2024 in the amount of $2,077,525.09.
So moved.
Have a motion by Scott and a second by Kurt. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Items number 4, items with County Engineer Brian Harowski. 4A is a bid letting for bridge project LFMFU 7X70 and 80 by 30 and a half foot PPCV bridge on 120th Street. Possible action to accept the bid.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yes, so this is our bridge letting up on 120th Street. We received 3 bids. They will be read off in the order they were received. If there's any bidders in the room, but just a reminder, today it will just be the as-read total. After this, if we have time, I'll go crunch the numbers and make sure everything pencils out. If everything does and the board's still going on, I'll probably bring it in here to award. So, all right, up first we have Iowa Bridge and Culvert of Washington, Iowa. See if I can get the thing open. We have a signed Iowa DOT bid bond. There we go, that was out of order. We have a as-read total for Iowa Bridge and Culvert of $648,871.03. 648,871.03. Did you get that, Tybee?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Jim Schroeder Construction of Bellevue, Iowa. Have a signed Iowa DOT bid bond. For Jim Schroeder Construction, I have an as-read total of $594,712.25. 594,712.25. Third and last, I have Brandt Construction Company of Milan, Illinois. I have a signed Iowa DOT bid bond. I have an as-read total for Brandt Construction of $787,566.15. 787,566.15. So that's what we had for bids. Looks like it was Jim Schroeder Construction was the as-read low, I believe. Is that right, Tabby?
Yes.
Thank you. So, again, we'll crunch the numbers and hopefully we can do that quick and get back in here. If not, if we need to look at anything a little deeper, you guys will see it next week. So, if there are any bidders, thank you for submitting a bid.
Okay, item number B is discussion possible action to approve the contract bond and certificate of insurance for LM 24-27370 seal coat on various roadways in Muscatine County.
Yes, so this is our annual maintenance seal coat. It was awarded to LL Pelling of North Liberty, Iowa, and everything looks good. So I would recommend to approve the contract and bond and insurance.
I have a motion by Danny, second by Nathan. Is that Nathan?
Yep.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Item C is discussion possible action to approve the contract bond and certificate of insurance for LM 24-37370 PCC patching on Vale Avenue, Y36.
Yes, so this is our maintenance PCC patching between Highway 61 and the city of Durant. It is with Cedar Falls Construction. So we received the contract documents and all is well, and I recommend to approve.
I'll move. Second.
Motion by Danny, second by Kurt. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Construction update.
Yes, I wanted to give an update on all of our construction projects. We're gonna get a pretty busy workload here shortly. Our bridge out on North Isaac, which is Iowa Bridge and Culvert, the dirt contractor's on site. They're currently working on revetment. Hopefully the weather stays the way it looks in the forecast, and things will keep moving along pretty quick. But they got another week or two, barring any bad weather. So it's good to see that thing somewhat wrapping up. Our Moscow Road overlay, I believe I previously said they were planning on coming in on the 24th. They actually pushed it back to the 31st of July. They'll be focusing on bridge approaches, some culvert work, basically prepping for paving. We want to have the majority of that done before we start to overlay the road. And notifications did go out to the landowners. We have had a few phone calls, just sorting through out logistics and how the contractor plans to work through the project. Our seal coat, which got approved today, I know that Pelling's thinking they're going to come in around the 1st of August. Our PCC patching out on Vale, which also got approved today, we got a pre-con set up for tomorrow. Cedar Falls, they're planning on this week. The latest we got is they're planning on starting on the 25th. So it's a lot sooner than what we thought, but we're going to have a pretty busy workload late this fall. So it'll actually be nice to get this project did and done, and hopefully get that patching done before harvest starts up in school. So, yeah, and that's what I had for a project update. So,
Brian, this is, I know, not really your project, but have they started moving on that haul down on the levee project?
no, I was down there this morning. I haven't spoken with the contractor or Klinger in a week or so, but I do know that they had to build a temporary entrance on the east side of the road. That is built and in. They also had their stoplights sitting down there, not on the road, but they were off on that property that's there. So I think they're ready whenever it's time. So I think the last I heard, I think they were waiting for water to come down.
Yeah, I
back
think
in
it had to be
river
below
trading.
21 feet or something before they could start working, so I think it's headed down, but I don't know that we're there yet.
So I'd say they're poised to start as soon as they can once the water allows them to. So,
Okay, thank you, Brian.
yep, thank you.
Okay, item number 5 are items with Michael Nolan from Horizon Architecture. Item 5A is presentation of the July 24 Muscatine County Facilities Master Plan Update.
Good morning. Nice to see everyone. Well, have in front of you hot off the presses is a culmination of, several months of work with a few different projects all coming together here. So as you recall, I think in 2018, we did a first master plan, and it was a 5 to 10 year. So over that time, we've done most of the projects in the original master plan. So this was an opportunity to kind of update that, reassess where we are with the facilities, and then make some recommendations for budgeting and kind of priorities for the next 5 to 10 years down the line. This study is going to incorporate the administration master plan, which we've been working on for about a year or so, some of the options in there. It'll incorporate, some of the discussion that we had about potentially looking at another facility and for administration, and then generally all the other facilities in the county. So we've had an opportunity to meet with staff throughout the county. Want to be thankful to everybody for their time and their input. This is, good stuff. The good news is we're in pretty good shape. There's a few things that we want to address probably in the short term, which are budgeted in yet for this year. And then for next year and on down the line, there's some things we'll have to make some decisions on, but we'll kind of make the recommendations. We've had some initial conversations with Nancy and Kayla about how the best way to approach this is, which we'll probably come back around to when it comes for budgeting again towards the end of the year. So without doing a page by page, essentially what we have here is organized very similar to the previous plan. So we have executive summary and introduction. We do break it out in each section by the administration buildings, which would be this building, the admin, and then the county attorney's office, and then also community services building. Law enforcement buildings includes the county jail and the deputies' quarters. Engineering buildings includes everything out on the engineering campus, and then the satellite facilities and the sheds there. General introduction. We haven't had an opportunity to sit down with conservation. That was another part of the services we've talked about as a separate project. We'll get to that here in a kind of as it gets settled in, but towards the end of the year, we'll take a look at some of those facilities as well. So you can kind of get the big picture, the projects that we're recommending for this year, and we'll kind of go to the budget summary and timeline towards the end. There's some maintenance on the administration buildings. There are some places where we have some water infiltration, and then you can see some of the finishes on the exterior are starting to bubble up a little bit. There's some projects that we want to address on this building, and then the community service building has an ongoing active infiltration kind of on the back stairwell, which is being managed, but that and then also the ramp on the front of the building, some of the stairs and the entries, those are things that have been kind of carried over from the previous plan that need to be addressed here in short order. And then there's a few projects over at the county jail, some doors that need to be addressed. There's some space conditioning, and then some sidewalks out at the deputies' quarters are probably the big ones we're looking at yet for this year. The way the plan is organized is we have a building by building kind of a summary of what we're recommending. And then towards the end of each section, we have kind of a breakout of what we're looking at for where we develop the budget from. So again, you can see on page 9 for the administration, we got some repaving of the parking lot, several items for general exterior maintenance on this building. And then at the bottom, each broken out, this is kind of the administrative building remodel, which is going to be addressed in the plans towards the end. This is going to be a 3 to 5 year potential priority here, depending on, again, you tell us what is priority for the county. There's a couple of things that we'll have to make some decisions on, but you can see the budget on that is kind of creeping up over the, the $1.5 to $2 million range. So things that will need to be budgeted in capital projects. Community services building, the top box is your general maintenance and repairs. So you see that's got some repointing. They've got the stairs and ramps, the infiltration, and then some general upgrades throughout the building. That money is budgeted in for this year, so we would be prepared to move forward to get a design going on that. The next one is potential relocation of Muscom was a discussion, so that budget is broken out in here. That's something we could look at as potentially a capital project in the next 2 to 3 years. And then the bottom is an option for a mechanical system upgrade throughout that building. Currently, it has an old boiler system with a separate air conditioner. The idea is that we're kind of doing fly to fail on some of those parts. Is it worthwhile to consider if that's going to be a building that's going to be a long-term in the county's portfolio to upgrade that to go with a potentially VRF or kind of a modern HVAC system for that building?
Do we have, pardon me, Mike, I think I saw on the facility, we have like space utilization, how many people? Cause I know staffing levels in that building have changed significantly over the years. I know our staff, we have a fairly light staff over there anymore. In the state, are they back in office yet? I mean, are they?
So if you look in Appendix A, we have the county agency space program. So what we have is broken out, the administration building, we broke out by department, and the idea being, along with some of the studies we looked at for looking at options, we just wanted to kind of define what's the space required for each area. And on page 25, the community services programming worksheet, the total area required for community services as is in the building right now is pretty much what they have, which is about half of the upper floor, which is a little over 2,000 square feet. The state DHS is on the other side. I don't know the exact occupancy in that space right now, but from what I understand, talking to county staff, it's not as full as it had been in the past. And then the entire basement of that building is essentially non-program space. There's some conference buildings, there's some meeting rooms, break rooms, things like that. But that's one of the recommendations, was to use some of that space as a potential location for Muscom. The upper portion with DHS, we didn't really address that in this study, but depending on what their use of that facility is, that could potentially be reprogrammable space as well.
Cause I don't know what are our obligations to the state? We've always had this space we provide, but it appears that they're not using spaces as much as they used to.
Yeah, they're doing, from my understanding, they're doing far more, remote work, as opposed to in office.
Who is the contractor, who's responsible for that now? For that group of folks? I mean, is that Beth still, or do we know who the local managers are?
I think it's Nicole, Utah.
Okay.
I think she came in here and met with you guys briefly once when she
When she first
took
took
over,
yeah.
but there's not a whole lot of interaction back and forth, unless they're unhappy about something.
I just think that's probably something long-term we need to figure out what they're planning to do, cause we have space needs and other, I think of the auditor and election stuff, and if that's a facility, I mean, probably we're gonna keep it long-term. I don't see any other options. We probably need to think about how that fits into the plan, and if that could be to solve some of our other issues.
Absolutely. We didn't address that space particular, but we have identified space in the community services building that could be used to facilitate some of the other projects. For example, we'll talk a little more in depth, but for this building, phasing and how do we get the renovations done in a manner that doesn't disrupt county services is one of the bigger challenges that we would look at for a full-scale project on that line.
Okay.
Okay, so the law enforcement, so other buildings, if I don't address them, for example, the courthouse, there's some things we'll talk about as far as an elevator potential upgrade in the future, but if it's not addressed specifically here, that means that we looked at the facility and it's in generally good condition, with no immediate capital or upgrade projects in line, general maintenance and things like that, that we're assuming that all buildings will continue to be maintained in the good manner that they are moving forward. For law enforcement projects, we had a kind of a bundle of things that we put together for law enforcement facilities. There is one door in the secure door in the facility inside the jail that's just at the end of its service life. It's just a, at the corrections, it's going to be an expensive door. Talking with Oscar and his staff, they've done everything they can with it, so it just needs to be taken out and replaced. There's also a few spaces with some of the mechanical chases that we've looked at options to create better access. Currently, they're smaller, kind of 2x2 access panels. So similar to what we did with some of the renovations on the jail, opening up to a bigger access panel just to facilitate access for maintenance personnel in the future. There's a south lobby, there's some space conditioning concerns, and that's into the booking area. And we look at adding potentially a split system to add some air conditioning. And then finally, there's some paving just to be done over at the deputies' quarters to kind of run a sidewalk around the back of the building. So a little pot of projects. The other thing we looked at was potentially long-term is looking at the future needs of the, particularly the jail administration staff and the sheriff's office, looking at, you know, the current use of the lobby for the jail, recapturing some of that space and doing some renovations on that, generally the administration area of the jail is something we've got kind of tagged for the 5-year plus just to keep on our agenda, looking to the future. The next section is the engineering. So projects we've started, which we kind of lumped into this, was to do a new planning and zoning and engineering office building. What we decided to do is, rather than press forward with that design, is we took a little step back to do more of a master plan for what needs to happen for the future for the engineering campus. The other project is the satellite facilities and the sheds. So those are all kind of in play here. If you look, and I'm going to flip here to the back, so the last 4 pages, and I do apologize, the electronic version of this, that anybody's following along, these plans got skewed. We'll get these corrected and get those updated. But we basically worked up a 3-phase approach for the engineering campus. Working with Brian and his staff, the big issues we're trying to address is there's several buildings out there. Just the buildings are kind of working, but nothing's working great. So trying to address what are some of the long-term and the best ways to, one, move the things that need to be moved immediately and then create some flexibility for the future. So the phase 1, what we're proposing is pretty much what we started talking about with the new engineering and zoning building, move that building out to the front yard. What we've decided after looking at everything in totality is we also could use that opportunity to create a little bit larger facility that would allow them to take some of the vehicle maintenance function into that building, at least temporarily, which would clear the way for future phases to take out some of the buildings on the campus that aren't really adaptable or working to the best use. So the idea here, kind of yellow box number 1, is new building with the zoning office and engineering offices with enough room to the back to create extra space for vehicle maintenance to move into. The other thing we have is the salt shed, the current dome shed, can be replaced at any time, so it's in poor condition, something we talked about, so that's also planned at, and this could happen at any of these phases, but probably sooner than later. What phase 1 would allow us to do would move into phase 2, which would be to demolish the current building that holds the vehicle maintenance and the offices, kind of looking at the configuration of those. They're clear span buildings, but there's 2 of them side by side with a addition in the center. We didn't really see running a cost versus value of keeping some of that and then doing another addition. It really just seemed like the better dollars were to go with one much larger shop, replace all of that in phase 2 with a new maintenance building that basically is going to have enough depth and enough flow through to have full pull through for the engineers' larger vehicles, which would be trucks and trailers and low boys, and create some, you know, better flexibility for the space. So that would be the phase 2 option here on the SK2. Kind of the final phase is we have then 2 outbuildings, which the functions of those would be absorbed into that new shed space. And then a determination will be made at that time after, you know, get a chance to get settled into the new facility, whether those buildings are salvageable, worth keeping, or whether we renovate or potentially demolish and remove those buildings. The final state essentially is what we're looking at on the SK4 would be 1 to 2 buildings or 2 new buildings, and then potentially keep 1 or 2 of the other smaller buildings if they're still serving function and purpose. Otherwise, we would just get rid of those buildings to create opportunity for the future. So from a what's on fire, you know, not literally, but what do we really need to do? Again, the engineering moving forward with the planning and zoning building, and that space is going to be kind of open up the options for the future. So we're recommending keeping that moving. And we talked with Brian and his staff. Essentially, we're going to look at picking up the full design on that building to keep that moving and get that ready for a 25-26 start. The satellite sheds is something else that we've talked about. We're going to pick that plan up again now. You know, Brian had asked for, you know, time to get settled in, but now we have a good idea on what and where we're going with. So that's another project that has been bonded for that we're going to move forward here in the next remainder of this year and into next year. Okay, so we go to jump page, sorry. Pages 21 and 22 are essentially page 21 as a facility by facility, kind of a synopsis and sum up of what we're looking at for dollars. Page 22 is what we're recommending as far as a schedule for what to do and when. So looking into kind of basically the remainder of this year, projects that have already been budgeted for are repairs and maintenance to the administration building, community services building, and then the small projects for the law enforcement facilities. So our recommendation will be is to move into design and get those going, hopefully to get those bid out yet here early part of fall and get some of those projects moving. The administration building, repave the parking lot, has also been budgeted for. We just have to look at the timing to see whether that happens this year or first part of next year. The new salt sheds and satellite facility, those have been bonded for. So again, we'll wrap up design, figure out where exactly those go, but those projects can move forward, looking at first part of next year for bidding, probably into the spring. The engineer zoning building, so this is a portion of that. We just need to work with the engineers so we can split the cost, or I say we, you, can split portion of the cost that can come from engineering's budget and portion can come from capital projects. But talking with Brian, we think that we've got a pathway forward to get that budget put together, to get that building started with the 25-26 budget. Am I speaking properly? And then from there, we kind of have some things to determine what are the priorities. There's been some discussion of relocating Muscom. Talking about the dollars and cents, is we have a bonding limit of $965,000. Is that something along that category? So essentially, as we discussed, project has to be completely able to be done within that budget to bond for it. Otherwise, it has to come out of capital budget. So looking at generally what's been going into capital budgets year over year, some of these projects may take a couple years to save for, make a priority to move forward with. So there's I would say the things that are up for discussion of what would be priorities would be renovation of the administration building, relocation of Muscom, and then probably the phase 2 on the engineers, so the much larger facility there. So those are some things that I think when we get into budget this year, kind of plan and forecast out to see how the dollars come together for those projects. And then projects that we have put out towards the farther out, again, talking with the Captain McCleary and Sheriff Reese, the renovation of their building would be nice. They're not overly concerned about doing that immediately for that. So that's something, again, we'll put that into the 5-year plus for the renovation work. The courthouse elevator, this is one that if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing. It seems to be functioning normally. It's not likely we would upgrade the size of the elevator, but by replacing the elevator, it may trigger other requirements with fire alarm systems, potentially sprinklers, things like that. So our recommendation is monitor that. As long as it's serviceable, keep that going, but keep it on the agenda that may be potentially $250,000 expense sometime in the future. All right, throwing a lot at you. So the other information here is Appendix A has the space program. So again, the idea is to this is now we kind of talked through all the departments, identified needs for space allocations. So as we're looking at options, this is what we've used to develop that. But then these are also available for the future, assuming steady staffing, that if another facility or other options came up, this would be a real easy plug and play to use to look at options in the future. So this goes for everything, including the new facilities we have. We just codified some of those spaces. We'll talk about the Appendix B as the administration renovation options. There's 3 options. It's kind of put sequentially from newest to oldest. I would say that the newest is the one that seems to make the most sense, and we use the other ones as development. We did the basic space planning, and one of the first questions we were asked was, could we put all public service functions on the first floor of this building? When we just said purely by space, if we just push boxes in there, yes, but when we sat down and talked with the departments, we were able to figure out just purely off of here's the minimum we need is the additional spaces that we need, and kind of came out to, if you were planning a new facility, you may be able to make it flow, but with some of the restrictions in this current facility, it didn't make a whole lot of sense. So an option 2 we kind of worked out was to to move just the auditor's office down here and leave some of the other spaces intact. And then after we added that, we had a chance to sit down and walk through with Tybee and her staff and really understand the voting process, some of the requirements for the access to the machines, the setup of the machines. And that kind of led us to our current phase state, which would be the July 10th, 24. The option on that, as we see, is for the administration building, if we were to move forward, that renovation would be to take this space, which is the administration, and back to the break room. This would all become renovated to be portioned for the auditors, and that would create storage and access space for voting machines all on the same level. That would take administration and move everything upstairs along with new conference rooms. So this, the council chambers, this supervisors, everything would move upstairs. From a phasing standpoint, we've talked about the most likely way to do this would be to move administration off-site, most likely to the community services building in some way, shape, or form. Do the renovation of this portion of the building first, move the auditor's office down here, and then move forward with the phase renovation of the upper floor to do the council. So that's, again, this is very high level, but kind of what we landed on as what we have with what we could do for the time being. Appendix C has a layout, and we talked with Chris Jaspers on this, to relocate Muscom to the lower level of the community services building. This would generally take space that's largely unutilized right now in the, let me get my bearings, so the northwest corner of the building. Two good things about this is that the dispatch needs to be kind of a hardened or a survivable shelter. The community services building is built incredibly stout, so there's probably some minor structural modifications we may look at, but it's pretty much set for plan. It's on the back of the, they printed them double sided, so if you go to Appendix C, the back of the cover sheet has this diagram. But this would give, give Muscom what they need for the dispatch center, supervisors' offices, additional storage space, and then they would have access to a shared break room with the rest of the facility. Talking through with Chris, one of the big ticket items on this is relocating all the communications equipment. They had a bid to do some of that, so we kind of plugged that number in. You'd see on the Muscom, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of $350,000 to $400,000. We'd certainly want to readdress that and make sure that we're looking specifically at this facility for those requirements. But this does seem like a feasible option if the county decided that it wanted to bring Muscom back into one of its facilities. And then the final appendix is the sketches for the engineering master plan. So any immediate questions or comments that come up? I know this is a lot, and again, this is a high level. We're not saying absolutely have to do it in this order. We know that there's a lot of decisions to be made down the road, particularly as far as budgets. We've kind of worked our way through what I would call the smaller chunks of stuff. So a lot of the things that are left are, it's a good place to be in because we're at the higher level of how do we kind of move to that next level of efficiency from things are working right now, but how do we make things work even better and plan for the next 25 to 50 years.
In the page SD1, which is the first floor, kind of first option that puts the auditor essentially where we are now, I believe. I'm trying to get a feel for how the flow of the, the lineup of early voters and such where would that be routed?
So the idea with this plan, let me get the right one. So this is going to be the SD1 dated July 10th.
Well, I'm looking at 8/22.
I think July 10 is the last.
Yeah, so if you go to the most current, the recommended plan is going to be right after page 28. So the other ones, I'm sorry, I should have clarified that. The other ones are older versions we looked at.
Okay.
So, yeah, so these are,
8/22/03, you're looking at 7/10/24.
yes, sir.
Okay, no, I mean, I'm much happier with the 7/10. I just wondered if these were different options you were considering, or just it appears that they're various iterations.
They are iterations, yes. And it included the others is more the conversation from the narrative, from some things that we discovered along the way. But yeah, so it's a great question. So the idea would be is that people would come through the front doors. They would come to, we have a large counter space there, which would allow for the separate stations needed to verify the voter, to get the ballot prepared. And it essentially would flow through, and we would add a new door kind of back behind Eric here, so that would be the flow through potential to move in and out. So that there's an opening there there. So essentially that whole kind of big pink box is a flow-through. And these are conceptual. We would refine these to make sure that we have the right spaces allocated. The other thing we did was we tried to get conference rooms in the appropriate location for public access to view the bid counting or the vote counting, things along that line. And then the other piece, as you can see where we have the big box, it says article or auditor, is we would carve out a corridor to the back of the current records room, and then that would, with some infill to these spaces to bring all the lunchroom and the break room up to the same level, that would become where the voting machine storage and setup areas would be, so adjacency for the auditor. And then hopefully that would also be easier access to get to the garage to get things out of the building.
Very good, thank you.
So Mike, is that, it looks like a little waiting area between recorder and treasurer. Would that be considered part of that initial phasing, or would that be something you'd talk about really on phasing if you moved an office?
Yeah, I think we would look at that and just have some discussions on, again, trying to minimize impact to recorder and treasurer. One of the the concerns is we do have this major kind of bearing wall that was original to the building is, kind of queuing in the aisleways. So if we could create, carve out there, that could happen really at any time. So, again, kind of nice thing, if we did this, we could cut everything off, work to this side of the line, and minimize impact. So we would just have to work with the recorder and treasurer to figure out how we would phase that with their offices.
And how much of our, if all this were done, how much of our capital budget would it eat into? Would it be all of it? Or what would our room to maneuver be after that?
If we did all projects that are on this list.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we're not anywhere near it, right?
I didn't think
I
so.
mean,
I didn't.
Million.
As of right now, we have probably about $3 million that's not allocated
Yeah, over,
taking into consideration this fiscal year's projects.
right, so,
So next year, we should have about $3 million left over to put towards.
I see. So this is not our plan, this is a list of options that are, some of which are obviously gonna be mutually exclusive.
Well, and if
Some
you
are
saw,
on the plan, so like the administration revamps that we talked about, community services, and then, we discussed possibly the jail and sheriff projects, if you reallocate the 195, I think that we bonded for a bathroom at the jail that they're deciding they don't wanna do anymore. We'd have to do a public hearing to reallocate that money towards those projects, but I think that that would be a sufficient use of those funds, being that it's still for the jail.
I think,
this building, the spalling I see on the side, and, I mean, we had worked on that, how many years ago, Nancy, 8, 10?
At least.
Have we found the culprit up there? I mean, do we have, is there parapet cap issues again?
that's our suspicion. I mean, it looks like there's some water getting in at the top. So in the auditor's office, you can see a place where we're able to track where some of the drywall has kind of buckled and there's some water damage. Chase that up to the attic. It looks like there's a joint in one of the parapet coping that is, we would want to do some exploratory, but take that cap off, look at it. It looks like there's some overlap, but I don't see it as necessarily sealed. So if that membrane isn't wrapped over top of the wall, it's possible we're getting some incidental infiltration in there that's just gonna be enough to kind of pick up what we're seeing over time.
So basically, are we talking a re-roof, or?
I don't think we would need to re-roof necessarily. I think if we take one piece of that coping off, we could do a patch and extend over or rework that detail would be our first approach to that. And then selectively, we have to scrape the paint, do some selective repointing and then repaint that wall.
And did I miss on the water issue in community services? Is that a repoint plan? Is that the?
So for community services, the plan would be, so for the front is to take out and rebuild the front ramp because that's kind of coming apart. And then for the back, there's a ramp and a stair that go up to that addition. The plan, those are also in average condition, would be to remove those, excavate, re-waterproof the foundation, and then fill back in and replace those stairs and ramp at the same time. There's a few places up on the rooftop that they've got some panels that are spalling on the backside. That would more or less just be probably a repoint and then waterproof those.
The roof on that building is in good shape?
It's in great shape. Yeah, we got a chance to walk it and look at everything up there. So just there's, again, a few minor spots. The building is in really good condition.
And your bigger concern is the HVAC system. Like did we do a new cooling tower in that or work on that cooling tower, Nancy? I don't recall that.
I think,
Community services.
Yeah, I don't think we've done anything for a long time with it.
I think the cooling tower, I think, has worked okay. It just there's like 9 boilers in the building right now as the current system, and they're just, as they are failing, they're getting replaced, but it's an older system. So then you have 2 separate systems. I have a cooling and a heating. The thought being there, if there was to make a long-term investment in the building, would be to go to like a VRF, like a heat pump technology for that building, not tied into the geothermal campus. But it's something we've talked with Oscar about. We just wanted to throw that in there for conversation of what is the right move for the long term for that space.
Yeah, okay.
So to your question about, is this a plan? I would say this is a roadmap, but we would have to make some decisions kind of year over year. A lot of these, just kind of assuming that we're able to allocate budget to capital projects year over year at about the same rate. Most of these would be get one done probably about 1.5 years or 2 years, and then get another one done for some of the larger projects with the current, as we understand the funding opportunities.
So if I look at the budget page, I'll put you on the spot, little Kayla. So we have the 24-25. You're pretty much up that 750, 850. All those are allocated. We currently have budget for those dollars.
Yes, like I said, except for the jail and deputies, we do have that money budgeted, but it's budgeted for another project. We have to do a public hearing to repurpose that because it's bonded money,
Okay.
but it would still be in line with being a jail project.
And I think it's part of that project was the access, so we would just be reallocating, potentially, rather than doing the bathroom, maybe rolling in that new door into it. And it's all in the same vicinity. Arguably, that door would have changed. We had talked about moving a location for a door for access for that bathroom anyway, so I don't think it's too far off from what was originally bonded for.
And then anything is, so the 3.3 million, 25, 26, is that the engineering complex or the?
That's a big portion of that. So what my recommendation would be at budget time or potentially before is to sit down, work our way through, get plans developed so we have a higher level or higher fidelity budget put together for that building, and then figure out between the engineer's budget and between the capital projects budget, what contribution we need to make that work, with the idea of starting that potentially out into the July of next year when the new budget starts.
And then the satellite facilities, we have nothing, we don't have any dollars programmed in any of this for satellite facilities for the engineer.
We do for one. We bonded for one satellite facility, so
We
that
have.
can begin now.
Okay. What did we bond for that, do you know?
750,000.
Okay.
So I would say pretty much the first 5 lines we've talked about, there's money in the budget for those. The engineer building, we've got a plan for that. And then from that point on, I would say the next 3 projects, to relocate Muscom, the administration building, and the new engineering shops, that would be where we'd kind of look at in depth, what does that plan look like? What's priority with those?
Yeah. Okay. And so the current engineering building, as I think of it, so you're thinking probably the proposal, because that's like just a pole barn, right?
Has 2 portions of pre-engineered metal buildings, and then there's like a masonry infill between them. What we're thinking of doing is, the thought is to do a pre-engineered metal building with a clear span for the new building, with the idea of then office spaces towards the front, separation towards the back, which is going to be towards the driveway where everything comes through, to create as much open space as we can for the vehicle maintenance.
And you do something similar to what he has in the new shed we built in back for the trucks, just large doors, drive-through, maintenance and repair.
I think as much as we could to facilitate as many of the vehicle maintenance options as we can in that space. Right now, I think the current bay is set up more for smaller vehicles. And then Brian, you have the north building, that's building has a full low boy pull-through. It's just deteriorating, the building's in kind of poor shape, so that would still facilitate larger vehicles. I would think that the new building would be able to facilitate smaller vehicles for sure.
Okay. Other questions for Mike?
I was just thinking about that particular building there, and you would build that, to utilize that front space, you build that to the east, is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, sir.
And approximately, how far east, how far off the roadway, shall I say, on a setback situation? I'm just trying to get this in my mind.
For sure. I can give you an approximate, so these are laid out to scale, so.
My thought on this is you would build it as far to the east as you could to be able to utilize the maximum amount of footage to the west for either building or parking.
That could be a possibility. I mean, we showed it with close proximity to the building, but we have, you see where setbacks are, and we can figure out exactly where that is. At the front yard, we looked at, you have an underlay on here that shows the utilities in there. The big one is there's a 4-inch sanitary sewer that comes out of the current building. We tried to avoid that, but eventually it's like, we're have to relocate it anyway. So that's probably the big one. There's a few other lines that we'd have to address there, but nothing that we looked at was like, let's not build the building here. So there's no major utilities that we found running through there that aren't just something we would roll into the project.
And we've got all these buildings on your complex now. We have them on the city sanitary sewer. We have them on MPW water. We're no longer on a private well, private sewer, any of that on all that campus, right? Okay.
One thing we would look at for the long term is currently, if I understand this correctly, water comes out of the existing building and goes over to the deputies' quarters. So we would want to look at, as part of that phase 2, for sure, getting the deputies' quarters connected to its own water source.
Right, not feeding through.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Other questions for Mike on this?
I think we will have, but not today.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of them.
This is
Okay, how about the courthouse roof? How are we
courthouse
doing over
roof.
there?
We're kicking along, so we had a chance to walk the roof on, I remember either Thursday or Friday of last week with our structural engineer, to take a look. The initial, when he did his first just kind of paper analysis, he was concerned about potentially adding another layer of slate. After going through, walking through the attic, looking at the current conditions, he's not that concerned about it. There's a couple of load transfer paths he was able to verify. We're expecting to get a memo back from him saying that we're good to go to put another layer of slate on top of the roof and not be overstressed with that. The other thing we looked at is there's some of the wood outlookers that are framing up the cornice. Some of those, if we've exposed those, are in various states of deterioration. Most of them are in good shape. He's going to recommend basically what the contractor was going to do was sister up 2 new joists against that. All the anchoring looks good, but basically get a procedure in place to make sure we're getting that followed. We got to look at the mock-up of the new slope surface for the cornice as they're working around. That looks fantastic. Really happy with the way that they're flashing that in. We talked about the issue, the question I think came up of the standing seam versus the flat seam, and the dollars that came with that. I know we're waiting on an official change order for some of these, but the discussion was the flat seam, the concern was that with the spans and the lengths we're looking at with thermal expansion and contraction, those could come loose. With the standing seam, you have kind of a built-in flex joint. So after reviewing that with them, I think that the standing seam is a good option. And it's, when they explained, is there's a little bit less labor on one, but they're working through on the other. So the dollars, when they get the change together, is going to account for that. From a design standpoint, I don't have any concerns with going to the standing seam. I think that the reasons, rationale that they're suggesting are good. The other thing we looked at is the cupola roof or the clock tower roof. So there was some, I don't know if you saw the pictures, kind of some spalling material on top of that. what most likely happens when they formed it, the original surface of that was, a little bit rough, so they probably did a skim coat over top to create a basis to put the copper tiles on. And currently, the copper tiles are nailed or screwed directly to the concrete. So we looked at, considered, do we basically repair that or re-skim coat that? The recommendation, and after talking through with the contractor, I think it's a good way to go, is basically to strip out and put some wood ribs and purlins over top of that and make a nailing surface for the new tiles to go down onto. They said some of the rib tiles that are kind of come loose, surprised that more of them hadn't come loose, because just basically over time that concrete has given up and there's nothing left to bite into. So the discussion was to prepare a change to do basically strip out and put a subframe over top of that to put the copper tiles back onto. So hopefully we'll see that here in the next week or so as well. It's the right thing to do. It's going to create, what they'll do is take that existing surface, put a continuous ice and water shield down on top of that. We'll strip out the new with new purlins, and then we'll put the tiles on top of that. So essentially, right now we have one surface of failure. For the future, we'd have two. So even if a tile came loose, we'd have another shedding surface for the water. We also reviewed some of the miscellaneous stonework and tuck pointing on the tower. Their mason's been through to look at. They're putting together, again, a cost to do that work, do some of the interior stonework. Recommendation will be to go ahead and proceed and do that while it's all scaffolded up and ready to go. It's fairly minor, nothing that's structural concern or anything like that, but it's just probably about the time to do that maintenance, and better to do it while there's somebody up there.
Oh, we have that whole building covered in scaffold.
Absolutely.
That's the
Got
cost.
access.
It's time to get the masons up there and get everything in shape for another 50 years.
For sure. Yeah.
Anything else for Mike? Or any other-
Just
Mike, you-
clarify, we did already do the cornice ledge change.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I thought we saw that last week.
Okay.
Okay.
So the next steps, I'll coordinate with Jim to look at the master service agreement. If everybody is amenable, we'd like to go ahead and get design service proposals together to proceed with the maintenance work on this building, community service, and do some of that work that's budgeted for this year, and go ahead and get that going to hopefully get that bid out here towards the, we'll say early fall at this point. I like to say late summer, but we've arrived. So,
We've arrived at late, yeah,
Yeah.
we're into, yeah.
okay,
All right.
thank you for your time.
Item number 6, items with planning and zoning administrator Eric Furness. 6A is discussion possible action to accept variances granted by the Muscatine County Board of Adjustment.
Okay, there was the two variances from the previous month that you had remanded back to the Board of Adjustment. There was no other new ones, so they reevaluated those, and I believe you should have the summaries in your packet where they, I prepared a worksheet that I'm gonna have them use from here on out that has a area for them to note and specifically look at what are the hardships, the property limitations, and items that address protection of public interest for each case, so that those things are in the front of their mind when they're considering motions. So, on the variance for, the accessory structure on a residential lot in Fairport, you can see those in our summary they provided. Those are the items that they, the reasons that they arrived at for granting the variance. The hardship was the very small parcel size in some parts of Fairport. Would make it very difficult to put a house, septic, well on it. Same thing, that's a unique property limitation as well, and that they felt that the accessory structure would not negatively impact the public or surrounding parcels. There's similar parcels in parts of Fairport that just have detached garages and sheds on them, so it doesn't create a stark contrast with other surrounding property uses.
So Eric, when you say their findings are listed here, is that right under where it says staff recommends approval of the request on, was it page 2, I think?
It'd be the page that at the top that says variances reviewed by the Board of Adjustment on July 12th.
This is the one for case 24-06-01, right?
Correct.
Okay, so, all right, I'm looking at that.
Did you get that? That should have got sent down to you.
It did,
It did not?
it did.
Okay.
Can you hold it up again?
Yeah.
My eyes aren't great.
Sure thing.
Well, these are the standards.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
not their findings.
The summary of their findings there on that page. Do you have that one?
Am I not seeing it?
There's one for each variance case.
I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, Danny's got it.
You got it right
Yeah,
there?
it has to be in the
You want
packet
this?
because they,
Yeah, I'm just, there's many for the item 6.
There was the original development report, probably the application.
Maybe it's in the-
maps, and-
This is the original.
Yeah, that's the original development report. And then this right here, at the bottom one says 1, 2, and 3.
That's the reasons there.
Those were their findings.
Oh, this is okay.
Yep.
This is one that says, it's entitled special use permits. Gotcha.
Yeah, we'll
Alright.
get to those.
Gotcha. I was looking at the one that said item 6. Thank you. I thought I saw it, I just couldn't find it again.
And do you want to look at these two separately, or do you want to?
I'd like to go over them each one at a time.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked at them, I just was trying to find it again and I couldn't.
Any questions on that particular one?
I don't, yeah, I have no problem with that one. I appreciate them making those findings.
And then what was the second one was?
So then the second was 240602 was the application for Muscatine Power and Water. There was a variance that would allow them to build that shed 10 feet from the east side property line instead of the required 15. The unnecessary hardship they found was the original configuration of the property limits the areas where the storage structure can be placed, the topography of the lot, including some steep slopes in the rear and the sides, limited spaces where a structure could be placed. And then the protection of public interest was the accessory structure would not negatively impact the public or surrounding parcels. It would be very similar in appearance to other agricultural structures in the area on a dead-end road. It's to be used only for long-term storage, so it's not expected to have a heavy increase in traffic on the road. It's not a day-to-day use building, just for equipment that they use infrequently that then goes out to job sites for a week or two at a time and remains on site.
So the issue here is just the setback?
That was the variance request, yes, was for
Yeah,
the setback.
I've driven out there and kind of walked around the parcel a little bit. I mean, if you're gonna put a storage facility down, that's really the only option because of the power and overhead lines and other things going on
And
there.
that's where they want it,
And
where it's
if-
indicated in the
And
application.
there was no indication from neighbors of any kind of an issue with this. I think my biggest concern all along was if they have the intent that if they're gonna have equipment that might be used in emergencies, snow emergencies or such, that's not a high priority route for us. We're gonna get to our paved roads first and, it may be a while. Anybody that
Yeah.
lives out on a gravel road knows it might be a while before you see a plow truck. And as long as they understand that, I don't have a problem with the application for that.
And they're aware of that, I mean, that substation's been operating there, it's kind of the same thing.
Right.
It's a secondary gravel road that may not get plowed right away. If there's an issue at the substation, they have to figure out a way to access it.
Where are the steep slopes on this property?
To the rear, it really kind of drops off. There's quite a bit of ground back behind, to the south of the substation, but it really drops into a drainage
I
way.
guess, I'm just trying to figure out, the setback requirement is from the eastern lot line there?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. I was thinking it was from the road and that didn't make sense. to
No,
me.
no, they
that
were
makes
able
sense.
to, we went out there multiple times with them, they were able to meet the minimum front setback, so they're gonna be 50 feet off the front property line as required. Initially, they were requesting a variance for the front, but when they staked out the proposal, the footprint, we went out and GPSed it, they can meet the 50 feet. They just can't quite meet the 15 on the side, so they asked for a variance of essentially 5 feet.
And that's crops to the east.
And that's a crop field to the east,
And what is it on the east side? What should it be?
15,
That's gonna be
15.
10,
and they're gonna be at 10.
and the shed has to be that size.
That was discussed, whether that, a minimum relief necessary
Yeah.
would be to build a smaller shed, but with pole buildings typically are in 8-foot increments because of pole spacing They asked for the 5-foot variance, and the board felt that it was a reasonable and not,
Well, I don't agree with that, but the board made the finding, that's what I asked them to do,
Yeah.
so I'll be happy with it. I'm not here to second guess the board.
well, like I said, we're working towards making them keep these issues, the legal hurdles
Yeah.
that the courts have established, in the front of their minds as they consider each time, so hopefully we'll see
Very much appreciated.
more thorough.
I'm just curious as I look at this, I'm guessing that the openings to access this building with equipment comes from the north?
No, they're actually facing it to the south. And that's why there was some question whether they'd be able to meet the 50, because if they squeezed it any closer to the substation, they wouldn't have room to pull
So
in.
they're gonna access the building, they're gonna
From
come
the
down,
south.
drop down, go past the
Yep.
building, loop back into it from the south.
Yeah, drive south towards the substation, then
Yeah.
back their equipment into the south-facing doors.
Well, the question I have,
God love them.
the question I have on that is, why would you not turn that building 90 degrees and access from the west?
They didn't feel that they would have enough because of the depth of the building and where the existing driveway already is, and guy wires and
They can't
things like that.
expand the driveway to the west, probably, any.
Well, and there's guy wires and
There's guy wires
transmission
going-
lines
Yeah,
coming in
sure.
all
Yeah.
different directions in there, and so,
I get you.
yep.
It's a bit of a challenge.
It is.
Can I speak to one thing? And I don't know if it's even applicable to reviewing the variance or not, but, when we speak to, it's been made clear, about the snow removal. Unfortunately, my personal feeling is that sort of thing gets lost in time as there's turnover,
Yeah.
people retire, and if it's an emergency situation, I know who's gonna get blamed, and it's gonna be our department, no matter who was warned and if it's in paper or not. And then also, we also have concerns with, if traffic does increase, who would be tasked with enforcing, with what's on paper for an agreement right now?
What's the distance from the entrance to that to a major paved road? Would it be North Mulberry?
Half mile?
Half mile-ish.
Yeah.
Don't suppose MPW wants to take over plowing of that section.
This city has the option. Yes.
That area.
I think your point's a good one, Brian.
We'd prefer that they don't plow it. We are understandable that does happen out in the country, during a major snow event that private landowners do plow out at times.
I think it was captured in the minutes when they considered the special use permit for the building and its proposed use, that this was for storage of job, like fiber digging equipment that is used infrequently in the summer, and we talked about that this is on a gravel road and the expectations that come with that are what they are, so I would have no problem defending our road department down the road if there's complaints that this is what you proposed, it was on a gravel road, where in front of a rural substation, and
Now this building will probably outlive all of us, though.
could be. And this area, quite frankly, is in an area that, if you look at potential annexation areas, would be ripe for annexation into the city, as development changes and goes on there.
Well, I can count on maybe two hands the number of times the next 20 years I expect anybody to look at those minutes. And maybe I'm being overly liberal with my estimate.
No, but we keep them in the file, so when there's complaints or questions, we can refer
Sure.
back to them for why we're doing and not doing what we do and don't do.
Okay. Any further, I'd accept a motion. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the variances.
I have a motion by Danny,
I'll second.
second by Kurt. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is review of the special use permits granted by the Board of Adjustment.
Okay, there were two special use permits. Case 240701 was a special use permit for a rural residence on Bayfield Road. There was a parcel of land, 240701 was a special use permit for a data center on a parcel of about 13.5 acres along Solomon. It's clear back to the west of the parcel, the back of the property, and actually has access off of University. So there'd be no new access off of Solomon. There's an existing service road that's maintained by REC for a substation in that area, which would, one of the reasons they wanted the data center located there was that the studies have shown that that substation is sometimes underutilized, and so the electrical demands for this data center would be easily met. There's a service road already off of University, and so they granted a special use permit for a data center to be installed on approximately 3 acres of that 13.5 acre parcel.
So, looking at this, there's like right to the east of University, there's what looks almost like a quarter section owned by this person, and then there's this little, 13 acre, we're talking about the 13 acre parcel, right?
Correct.
And isn't Solomon gravel there?
It is.
But you said that was my question, so there is an access off University.
Yep.
Yeah, I see it right there,
Oh, is that
for
a
the
substation?
substation that they maintain.
Yep. And that would be that is the same access road that will be utilized for this data center.
What are the?
And it's gonna be placed in pretty close proximity to that substation?
Correct.
Makes sense.
So they would not be trying to access it off Solomon.
Correct.
Good.
Well, I would guess it's limited traffic anyway, correct? I mean, this is a data center, it's probably a hardened structure with high electric consumption.
Correct, yeah, I mean, there'll be like 2 to 3 people working in that area, so it's not gonna be, tons of people coming and going,
Yep.
other than the construction part.
Should get her on the record. What's her name?
Right.
Are you the applicant, ma'am?
Yes,
Okay. We should probably just get your name for the record.
Tasha Kinsett,
Tasha, how do you spell your last name?
Kensett, and it's TOSA.
Okay.
Okay, ready for me for the second one?
Yep.
Second one was 240702. It was for special use permit to allow construction of a rural residence on the parcel. It's located east of Keokuk just north of Bayfield Avenue. This parcel was found, it's an untouched quarter. The applicant is proposing to split off a couple acres, build a rural residence on it. It met and exceeded the minimum separation distance from any other residence. The parcel weighted CSR2 of the parcel was only 42, so it's well below the recommended CSR2 rating. There's no state-managed livestock facilities anywhere in the nearby vicinity, and so they granted a special use permit for a single-family dwelling.
East of Keokuk, north of Bayfield.
Correct.
How far east of Keokuk?
Parcel has frontage on Keokuk.
Okay.
Here it is. If you wanna see it, Scott. Right there.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I know exactly where it is.
These are just for review.
Okay.
I think you've answered my question. Oh, we have a,
Can I interject on the last case?
sure. If you'd
So,
give your name so we can get it in the
Don
minutes. so-
Roth with East Iowa Light and Power
Okay.
Cooperative. So we're being advised from our insurance company that this data center access from Solomon and not from University, just because it's not a public road going by our substation there. It's private there, so we're still, in conversations on whether the primary access would be from Solomon versus University. So that hasn't been decided at this point, but we've been advised to make the primary access from Solomon.
And I don't think with limited traffic, that's a huge issue for us. I mean, there could be access issues.
There's a creek that looks like.
I think it
goes
would have been,
across there.
yeah, it would have been more ideal to have, for the Board of Adjustment to have considered that as an option, because it's certainly, I think, one of the comforting factors of this, is that there's an existing service access road off, and that was what was portrayed at the meeting as being used. Obviously, the County Roads Department would be put in a position to have to evaluate a new entrance, which I don't like painting them in a corner and putting pressure that they have to grant something because a special use permit or variance has been granted that may or may not meet their separation distance from other, you know. from
And that's
other-
across farmland too, which
Yeah,
we have to get in the CSR.
During construction time, I mean, it's a gravel road. We're not talking giant wind turbines here, but it's depending on
Maybe
time of
heavy
year of
equipment.
construction, certainly time of year even for access. I mean, it's not seal coats, that's good. They're not always subject to embargo, but we've seen
So then
gravels even been embargoed at times.
Yeah, Menards is right.
And
to
we're
that.
looking at an August, September. date,
Yeah,
just as a-
I mean, that would have been,
Was
Nice.
everybody given notice of the board's meeting?
yeah,
Okay, did you
Yes.
guys attend that board meeting?
Was there.
And so the board took that, and you raised the issue, and the board took that into account?
The applicant was here that had presented, we had presented him with a contract that said that access off of University could be used as a secondary or emergency access, but our preferred access was through Solomon. And there is, is it an access road or an easement that we have to get through there with the current, landowner, Matthew Eblom.
We have a 33-foot easement that we maintain, that used to be our primary access point. There were
Where?
times when that culvert you mentioned, you know, became a problem, so that's when we decided to go ahead
Oh, I
and
see.
pave, you know, road from University, to the substation.
Oh, I see, so you've got this, there's a tiny little path that goes east to Solomon to your substation. Okay, yeah.
Runs
Could bear-
west just of Solomon to the.
Right, right, yeah.
And you have easements in place for.
Oh, that looks like it might just be a
Looks like there's an
dirt
access.
track or something.
Correct,
Well,
yeah,
it's
so
but
we
there's
have
a-
recorded easements.
So
that
there's a
we
way to
allow
get
them
there,
to
but,
use.
I just drove by that 2 days ago, and I caught my eye, there were people up there working and that, and, I didn't necessarily notice the quality of that roadway, that accesses that. What is the quality of that roadway that accesses that from the Solomon?
It's a gravel lane, I would say it's like a level B road, if, you know, if you wanna paint a picture, it's a level B road that there is a washout, I'd say halfway, you know, off of Solomon to the substation, that's always been problematic for us, and that's why we ultimately paved that road from University,
On the west side?
on the west side.
It looks like it might be, you know, one of those gravel roads that's got weeds growing down between where the two tires go.
Right, cause we quit maintaining
Yeah.
it because we had a different access point. So, there's just concern that, you know, it's not a normal roadway, dimensions in between the fencing and our substation, and there's poles and there's guy wires there. So we would prefer traffic not go in front of our sub on a daily basis.
So, I mean, before us, all we have to do is to review. We're not in any position to like send this back to them like we are with the variance.
There will also be a development process for this as well, correct? Because you haven't built.
right, I mean, the special use permit, I think I can confidently say was granted, given they were under the impression that the primary access was gonna be off. I think that was certainly something that was,
Right.
a comforting factor, that it was gonna be coming off University.
But these guys are under no obligation to allow that, as I understand it, contractually speaking. That's my understanding, that's not my legal opinion.
Right, I mean, I don't doubt they have an easement already, you know, off of Solomon, but,
Their easement.
but again, I don't know if it's a permitted entrance, or if it's just remnants of a, you know, an old farm drive that they have an easement under. The last thing I wanna do is create pressure on our road department to permit entrances
It
that
seems
they
to
would.
me that there needs to be clarification on this.
But we're not in a position to send it back.
Yeah, it's just a
We can
review.
just note it. So probably gonna have to take place in the application phase, right, in the permitting?
Well, I mean, the special use permit is granted, I think the impetus is normally then that we will issue the building permit. You know,
Pursuant to that special use
pursuant to the
permit,
special use permit.
Which you say was contingent on, or with the understanding of access off University, right?
I believe so.
So, it's not really before us to decide this one
It's
way or the
not.
other. We're we're just learning about it, and that's all.
I guess, so that at the most, we would just need to clarify here and now, before they would choose to move forward with development, that if the road department finds that a permit is needed and it doesn't meet their, their normal standards for separation from other entrances, hill crests, curves, whatever, that they're under no obligation to grant one.
Well, is that, for the data center, is that a deal breaker coming in off Solomon?
No, I mean, we've spoken to the owner, you know, to be able to, you know, winter months is probably gonna be the worst for us, and being able to use maybe contractors to clear the snow or something to be able to access that. So we have talked to the owners, you know, along that road.
Okay.
Clearing the snow on the private lane.
Yeah, sorry, right.
Yeah.
And we can certainly review a potential entrance permit. We've done that before. People wanna look into potentially purchasing a property for specific use, just so they know that an entrance will or will not be allowed. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really review this too much, because I was under the same impression that it came off the university, so it really wasn't gonna affect our department. But yeah, we would have the same concerns of snow removal,
So
additional traffic.
if I'm reading this right, did the staff recommended approval of this request? Obviously, the understanding comes off the university. Did the Board of Adjustment make any kind of finding, or?
They didn't make a stipulation as part of their motion, but I like I said, I just feel very confident that part of the comfort of
Oh,
that this
sure.
was an acceptable use was because we were all under the impression they'd be utilizing the existing entrance off of
Yeah, I
University.
mean-
I'm not saying they wouldn't have come to the same conclusion had the Solomon, but it does concern me that now there's a lot more hesitation to use.
Well, they may wanna think about making that explicit in
I'm
the
already
future.
thinking about, it maybe makes the application process more onerous, but clarifying somehow or getting something
Yeah, like what
more in
things
writing that
need to
this
be
is.
kind of determined.
Yeah,
Cool.
so,
When did they meet and decide?
12?
July 12th,
Very recently.
yep. I mean, technically, there's a 30-day pause on any decision granted where any aggrieved party, can appeal, but the appeal process essentially is to the courts, is my understanding.
Yeah, I was just thinking if there's new information.
Can I ask for reconsideration?
It's, yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know that the ordinance covers that particularly, but, obviously I wasn't there. I'm just thinking if there's a way to go back and present it the way that it's gonna be, or it's intended to be, then the commission can make their determination.
That probably falls into that gray area of me making the determination that I don't have the authority to grant special use permits, and there's something material, an issue that should be part of the consideration and, and putting it back on the agenda.
I guess I would, if there's a way to get it back on the agenda, it probably sounds like both sides can then be heard and a determination made by the appropriate.
And they'll meet on the 9th again, right?
Yeah,
That's not too long.
right. Well, we've already published the agenda for August. I can hold another meeting. Just
Yeah.
Well,
schedule another one.
definitely need some clarification.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So you guys go-
Anything else, Eric?
I don't think so.
It's like, I'm done.
Alright. Always something. Alright, item number 7 is discussion of possible action to approve an ordinance rezoning of area consisting of lots 37 through 44 of Kansas State's Chatham Edition in Bloomington Township from R1 residential to R2 residential on the second of 3 readings.
So moved.
I have a motion by Nathan,
A second.
second by Danny. Eric, did we get any correspondence on this? Nancy, you haven't seen anything? Okay, this is a roll call vote. Scott?
Aye.
Nathan?
Aye.
I vote aye. Danny?
Aye.
And Kurt?
Aye.
And so we'll have one more reading on that, as no one's interested in that. All right, item number 8, discussion possible action to approve the minutes of the July 15th, 2024 regular meeting.
Move to approve.
I have a motion by Kurt,
Second.
second by Nathan. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, the same? Motion carries. Correspondence, Scott.
Nothing to note necessarily. I mean, I had a lot of conversations with people at the fair and everything, but nothing major to bring up.
Okay, Nathan?
Nothing other than, I think, stuff we didn't all get. I think we all got the invitation to the Farm Bureau steak fry coming up. I think there was a couple, like, we got an email about the CrowdStrike situation from Bill Riley.
Yep.
And that was about it. That was it, yep.
All right, so all I had to note on the 19th, I don't really know who they were from. I had a couple of emails, came through some kind of a message system asking questions about the 245th situation. I know Jim gave us an update last week, and that process was, I don't really know who they were from. I could make a guess, but I won't do that. Danny?
I got a call, a couple calls actually, from a Stephen, I hope I pronounced this right, Cracklio, Kraklio. There was a wreck, another wreck on Highway 6 in Moscow Road. And I spoke with Brian about it a little bit. He mentioned maybe that there could be some solar lights added to the stop signs. And he thought maybe some trees needed, it might help if some trees were cut back. I haven't been out there, so I don't know if that's something that may be needed or not. I also spoke to the sheriff about it. He said he has sent some emails a week or two ago about something similar. He said that I think he said there's 3 or 4 intersections in the county that he thought these might be beneficial. I think most of them were state-owned stop signs, if I remember what he spoke about. But if this was done, I think he mentioned there was around $1,200, and the county would have to maintain them going forward. Over this year, we've seen a lot of accidents in the county that have led to fatalities and a lot of injuries. And I always advocate, like them uncontrolled stop signs a while back that we didn't move forward on, that maybe something like this, even though it may be small, may be beneficial to improve the safety out there on our roads where, it's pretty dangerous out there. So I'd like to see us maybe consider those, and maybe there's a conversation to be had more with Brian and the sheriff if we add something to the agenda to see if that's something we think makes sense.
I think this was, and Quinn was probably referring to I think it was an email conversation he and I had, maybe it was a few weeks back, about after we'd had some additional accidents. I don't think we had any fatalities in the last one. I think it was I don't know, it was a 6 or F70 and 38 in that area anyway. And we have a few intersections where, clearly, I mean, you heard the sheriff recently say that, people are driving too fast on Highway 38, and they were gonna step up enforcement. Those intersections have become, we've had some issues there, and I don't know what we can do about them. Brian, there was a while back when we had a group from the, I remember a few years ago, and we did something out of Discovery where there was someone from the state highway safety that came out and talked about, problem areas, and looked at, it was about the time when we were doing they were doing the overpass at Lutheran Homes because of the fatalities that they'd experienced there. Do you know, is there someone that we can talk to at the state, or?
We certainly could. A lot of those intersections, like take the F70 and Highway 38. It's just my opinion, but there's multiple rumble strips, there's stop ahead signs, and the sight distance is really, really good. And then there's stop signs, and you're correct, those are the states.
I'd say 180th and 38th.
I don't know how much the benefit of a flashing stop sign would then be, but that's my opinion. I don't know if there's much for data out there. I'm sure there's something. I haven't dug into it yet, though, but I certainly can. At Highway 6 in Moscow Road, I did run out there and take a look at that. It appeared to me that all of our brushes has been trimmed. It's the going, and I don't know the specifics of the accident that took place, but to me it looked like the state could potentially probably trim some of their trees, and that would improve sight distance. So
People fly
at that intersection, please remember that the bridge on the south side is not ours. That's the state's. So It is certainly a funky intersection with the bridge being right there. And the bridge has a somewhat unique kind of a humpback to it, so.
Kinda unique.
Get nosebleeds on top.
So.
Yeah,
But
I know, you know, so I don't know what the proper, you know, a lot of these, I think those all are state intersections, right?
Yes, and so after the F-70, Highway 38, the state came by because they had a request to put in the flashing stop signs. And they explained the cost sharing to it. Probably the biggest somewhat fear is the ongoing expense of the maintenance of it and the potential liability of, you know, if you get one of these knocked out, does that land on the county if there happens to be an accident there and it's not performing or operating properly? So, but like I said, a lot of the intersections that they brought up, they have about all the other preventative tools that we have: the rumble strips, the stop ahead signs, the nice sight distance coming up to the intersection. So.
Do they usually flash the stop ahead, or do they flash the stop?
It's the stop sign.
Yeah, it's actual on the stop signs
Yeah.
that kind of makes it more obvious that it's not that they're, I mean, I think the rumble strips and the stuff, I mean, everything's there that people should be
It's
stopping.
obviously pretty obvious.
It's pretty obvious already, but
There was a push a couple years back. It was going through the state legislature, and for some reason it failed. The state was going to move to require rumble strips at every primary road, so a state highway. That ended up failing. I think we have rumble strips at every one of ours, but there are some counties that don't. So.
Well,
they
I'm sure
wanted-
you'd get pushback, because if you've ever lived or been by the proximity of those rumble strips, they're kind of annoying and loud.
They certainly are. I mean, they're doing their job, grabbing
Yeah.
the driver's attention. The
Well-
the current Iowa DOT recommendation on those is, if they're there, if you're gonna resurface a road, if they're there originally, you put them back in. If they're not there, you don't put them in. That's their recommendation and their guidance, so.
well, it may be worth digging into and trying to get do some more research and get some more people's opinion on it, you know,
I'd like to see what our options are, and what the
Right.
costs and liabilities.
It sounded
would
like when I was speaking to Quinn this weekend out to the fair about it, he had concerns with 3 or 4 intersections that seemed to have a few more accidents at them that he thought maybe they would be beneficial and,
And come October, we're hosting it's SS4A, Safer Roads for America. I think that's what the acronym is. But along with that, the DOT has hired a consultant to generate a safety action plan for every county. You guys should have received an invite here a week or two ago for it. It's going to be held at Discovery Park. They will most likely speak to traffic control items and.
And will they do, so they'll do
And they
they'll do
also-
a county-specific plan?
Yes, and they will look at accident reports and where they're happening and what is in place at those intersections.
Do you get all accident reports at all intersections?
No. We have access to them after they are filed and completed. Yes, a lot of our funding and our design going through the state, we have to pull accident reports and verify that what we're designing isn't going to make the situation worse.
that's all I had for course
Okay.
comment.
Kurt?
Yeah, I talked with Kelsey Myers, the Fair Board Manager, after the fair yesterday, and she wanted to give a big thanks to everybody that attended, exhibited, and a special thanks to the Sheriff's Department, the Sheriff Reese, the deputies, and the reserve officers, and also our local fire and emergency people from West Liberty, Wilton, Atlas, and Nichols all participated to help make the fair run smoothly and safely.
Good. Thanks. How about committee reports, Kurt?
And
Danny?
I didn't have any committees, but I did attend business after hours on 7/16.
Okay. On the 15th, I had the Eastern Iowa Mental Health Region. And on the 16th, they had the Robert Young Center and CAD's Board of Director meetings. Nathan?
I do not have any. Monday the 15th, I had Conservation Board, that's all I had.
Okay. Next is items with the administration office. Item A is discussion and direction regarding signing a letter from the Eastern Iowa Mental Health and Disability Services Region Governing Board to the state of Iowa requesting incentive funds exception be granted. Our meeting last Monday, I think I told you all the state had clawed back roughly $3 million over the last 18 months from the Eastern Iowa Mental Health Region, and now we're about 1.9 million, 1.6 million, Jessica, is that $1.6 million short of meeting obligations. And so our only hope, our only chance now is we have to borrow into next fiscal year funds to pay last fiscal year. And so now we are faced with looking at trying to do about a 30% budget reduction, which, as you all well know, if you have to do a budget reduction that large, you gotta start early, because you're not gonna do that in 3 to 6 months. You've got contracts and everything out there. So if you, when they did this, they, they always look at fund balance, and what their issue was, they thought counties were sitting on too much money. So the state was pulling money back. So they have about $31 million that they've pulled back from various regions sitting in treasury at the state. So what the board would like to do is go to them and say, hey, you withheld, it's outlined in the letter that what was withheld from us. Because again, what I don't think people always understand is we're about 18 months out when we write these budgets and funds, and coming off of 2020, 2021 in the mental health arena, we saw significant reductions in activity levels. And it wasn't until about last September where we actually saw people coming back out for services. So, we were running huge budget surpluses that we didn't forecast because we didn't know. And then all of a sudden, we were running about maybe 50-60% of budget for many months. And now all of a sudden, after about, August, September last year, we started hitting into the 90+% of budgets. And so our funds diminished quite quickly. And the state, but based on this formula-based approach, not the per capita spending, they clawed back payments. I don't think they made our last 2 payments last year to the tune of about 1.6 million, which is about what we're short. So what the region would like to do is send a letter, and I think we're gonna send it to all of our legislative contingency as well. I have great concerns for the long term, because one of the things I want to talk here about is we need to look at code sections and what the county, a lot of times, like if you read in that letter, about $600,000 to $800,000 of the expenditure the region has had has been people waiting for their Medicaid to be approved. So these are people in services, getting services, and providers are doing it, and they're in the Medicaid process, which my understanding, Jessica, 6 months could take to get it approved. So for those 6 months, the counties have been the ones that have always bridged those payments. And we no longer have a funding mechanism. So my question, is what does code say? Does code say we shall pay that or not? Because if it needs to be coming out of code if we don't have a mechanism to fund, because the county taxpayer no longer has a mechanism to find for these payments. And I don't know if that's under general services or if it's under mental health and disability services or what code sections, but I'm very concerned because, I don't know that the state fully understands what the counties have been dealing with for the last 50 years on these types of issues, and I'm most concerned that people that need the help won't get it.
Well, and the 1.3 was for FY '23,
Yep,
1.5 for FY '24.
okay,
So the ask is, and then 800,000 of Medicaid, so the ask is gonna be
3 point something.
3 point something, yes.
Yeah, because we currently we have, as of last meeting, July, we have $1.9 million in payables. in known expenditures, and we believe there'll be more coming in. David says it always happens, and we have about $500,000 in funds. So we are short, and we're gonna have to borrow into, our next year's fiscal year, funding to make those payments. And then we're gonna have to do budget cuts, so. And what I'm looking for here is just a consensus that it's okay for me as a representative on that board to sign that letter on our behalf, requesting the state for those. That's theoretically what those incentive funds were there for. They pulled them back out of counties, they should remit them back. And then the other thing is that fiscal year, and I wanna, for some of you that haven't been involved in this, unfortunately, I've been around this for too many years. If you recall back in 2014-15, when they first started taking mental health services out of counties and it went to this regional approach, their goal was to get the mental health funding to a roughly $54 per capita expenditure. Currently, in our fiscal year, the next fiscal year, we get $40 per capita. So we're 14 under that, and in that $55, when it was originally worked on, it was only for the adult services. They've now added children to this regional approach. And so they're expecting us to do adults and children at a less amount than what the original concept was brought for. I think that's kind of insanity to
Heck,
me.
that was real close to the amount we were spending in 2016 per person.
What?
Was it right around 42?
Our last year dollars were 38. They give us they're
Yeah.
giving a 1.5% per year increase in the per capita, which I'm fine with. I think that's okay, and it's something you can manage to. But I don't think they ever put anything as it relates to children. They didn't give any additional funding. And then the other thing is as you well know from other areas that we deal with, is they're always add requirements. You're gonna have to add, now you have to pay this, now you have to do that. And it's just, it's getting very difficult to manage, so. So do I sense that it's okay for me to go ahead and sign that letter and approve?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, we'll send that off, then thank you.
Yep, that's fine.
Anything else, Nancy?
I don't have anything.
Okay, item number 12 is to receive information from county employees or comments.
I want to speak to a couple of things. One, I want to go back to what we were talking about, Danny, on 6 and Moscow Road. I haven't verified this, but I've been told by people in our office, it's people that have been around longer than I have, that after one of the accidents that happened there, the southbound portion of the intersection, north of 6, there was not a stop sign island there. It was just out on the side of the road, and then they added a sign out somewhat in the middle of the turning radius, so it's, more apparent for traffic going south. The northbound one does not have anything like that, but I was told that did get added at some point in time.
Okay.
We were able to crunch the numbers on our letting that we had here earlier for LFM FU9 7X70 up on 120th Street. And I wanted to correct a couple of the numbers that were read. There was some math corrections. Brant Construction was actually $813,666.15. 813,666.15. Jim Schroeder Construction, the as-read low, there was a correction to that dollar amount as well. It's $594,719.25. 594,719.25. Jim Schroeder Construction, that was a real minor error. So I would recommend to award to Jim Schroeder Construction.
Motion?
So moved.
A motion by Nathan, second by Kurt. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries.
All right, thank you. We'll get out contract documents and hopefully get them back down here in a couple weeks for approval, so.
Okay. The other county employees wishing to address the board on an issue? Okay, item 13 is receive comments from the public. Seeing no one come forward, we are